So our guests, once again, are, I've seen some highly distinguished, all of us are very distinguished guests. I mean, you will permit me at one point or the other, if they won't get embarrassed, I just mentioned, a couple of people that have been of tremendous support to us and quite a lot of encouragement. He is a particular subject of interest, and I'm glad that he is here. I'm going to introduce Iyin shortly, but for those who are familiar with technology a little bit, you will know Iyin Aboyeji. If you don't, then it's possible that you are not quite very familiar with technology. However, if you have heard of Andela before and you have heard of a Flutterwave, you should know Iyin Aboyeji. And then, of course, his recent project is Future Africa. I'm going to introduce Iyin Aboyeji, who will be Iyinola Aboyeji, who is our guest today. But before then, let's look at what is it that we are talking about. He will be speaking on the mission-driven business. And without wanting to take your time, this is a topic that is very, very close to my heart. Many years ago, I honed my skills on strategy. And I keep doing that. And I know that, look, if an organization is not mission-driven, in no time, it will be out of business. This is the 10th in Touchstone BSS. We have spoken to some of the thought leaders, or rather, they have spoken to us. And one of them, I'm so glad to tell you, is here, the founder and managing director of System Specs, the owners of Remita, Mr. John Obaro. Thanks for joining us. I'm sure Mr. Obaro is not, or Iyin Aboyeji is not a stranger to Mr. Obaro, or neither Mr. Obaro is Iyin Aboyeji. I know there are other technologies that are here, but please just permit me to say that. So we've talked about technology. We talked about the dynamics of change in the environment. We've talked about values as part of issues of sustainability. Strategy is also part of this, and that is what Iyin Aboyeji will be, briefly speaking to us about. Now, before he starts to unpack what he has for us, I'd like to tell you that Iyin Aboyeji is the general partner and co-founder of Future Africa. What is Future Africa? Future Africa is a platform that provides capital, coaching, and community for mission-driven innovators. So you can imagine why he wants to speak on the mission-driven organization, mission-driven business, innovators, building an African future where purpose and prosperity is within everyone's reach. Proud to co-founding Future Africa, he served as the Deputy Director General for the Dr. Obi Ezekwesili 2019 presidential campaign. So Iyin Aboyeji is not all about technology. He is involved. The Greek will tell you that the citizens are the people who are involved. I think they divided people in society into three. I can't remember the third one, but I remember the idiots. They are the people who won't do anything about anything. So he is not one of the idiots, because I think it's Plato who has said, if you don't get involved in the business of politics, then you should not complain when you are being ruled by fools. And I mean, you and I will know whether the people who are ruling us are wise men and women, or I won't call them names. Anyway, so he also helped to build Andela and Flutterwave, two of Africa's largest and fastest growing technology companies backed by global investors. For those who know, I think it's the Zuckerberg Foundation or directly himself that invested in Andela. I don't know of some. He's going to tell us if we have time to ask him about other people. Iyinola Aboyeji is more popularly known as E. He holds a bachelor's degree in legal studies from the University of Waterloo and is a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. He also sits on the board of a number of corporate and non-profit organizations and advises a number of national and subnational governments across Africa on how to support high-growth, innovation-driven enterprises in their domains. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege as a host of Touchstone BSS to welcome Iyin Aboyeji, who will be speaking on the subject, the mission-driven business. Let's welcome Iyin Aboyeji. The next 30 to 32.
Thank you.
Iyin, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate the very warm welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to many of my elders in the room. I don't take the privilege lightly. I think it was earlier that Pastor Tunde mentioned that Mr. Obaro was in the room. I just wanted to pay my respects. He's one of the fathers in our industry who laid the foundation for the work that we do today. So I'm sending my regards. Today, I'm just going to talk about building a mission-driven business and why is it necessary as part of this series. And it's not a very straightforward topic, because one might just imagine, well, isn't the purpose of business to make money? I always hear this a lot, especially from people before my generation, you know, don't be so emotional. The reason why we build business is to make money, and, you know, and so on. But you know, I guess I come from a slightly different school of thoughts. My belief is that business is a tool of societal change. And what do I mean by that? A lot of people rightfully just see business as making money. So, you know, the idea is you have some skill, you build an organization, and the idea is you go, you provide your services to whoever pays for it, and then they pay you, and that's the end of the story. But when you really take a look at the evolution of capitalism, what you realize is that, and you look at the development of some of the capitalist centers of the world. So, for example, you look at the United States, you look at England. What you very quickly learn is that what business really is that it's a tool of societal change. People envision a world that is only possible to bring about through the exchange of demand and supply that can only happen with business. And then they establish new norms on that basis. That has been the historical record of how businesses get made. And particularly at this time in the world history or in our country's history, you can look around and very easily find 1 million reasons why now is not a good time to build a business. In fact, smart people will tell you that if they had a choice, they would sell their business and just hold money now, because it's a very, very tough time for business. However, I beg to differ. You know, now is the time for people who have a vision for what the world needs to look like, to push forward those philosophies, to push forward those thought patterns, to push forward those philosophies in business. And I'm just going to talk very briefly about three. I know this is not a religious gathering, but unfortunately, I guess the part Pastor Tunde thankfully left out of the bio is I was raised by pastors, so you forgive me for the religious references. But I want to talk about three principles, biblical principles for building a mission-driven business. I don't have a lot of extensive notes here, so I might not necessarily reference the specific Bible verses, but I would make regular reference to them. So that's just my warning up front. But I want to talk about these three particular principles because I think that they set the tone for how we all, as business people, as we talk about business sustainability, need to start thinking differently about the way that we do business, particularly in the context of the country where we live, which is Nigeria, and on a broader scale, Africa and the world at large. The first thing is the purpose of business. And I think before we can establish that, we need to consider the purpose with which we are all put on earth, regardless of who we are. The general idea, obviously, for those of us, particularly for those of us who are Christians, is to bring glory to God, right? But in particular, if you actually think through the parable of Jesus and the talents, which I consider the most straightforward investor story, right? You start to understand that the whole purpose of business is more than just making money. For those of us who remember the story, you know, there were three men who were given talents, different talents at different scale. And then their master went on a journey. And on his return, the first one, you know, tripled the yield. The second one doubled it. And the last one went and hid it in a hole. Because as far as he was concerned, he didn't think it would make sense for him to put that talent to any productive use since he wasn't going to be getting a direct benefit from it. Unfortunately, the reality is that while many of us imagine that we might be like the first or the second people in being productive vessels for capital, particularly the greatest capital that God gives us, which is life. The reality is that we actually think like the last man because we tend to believe that the purpose of business is just to make money. Now, one of the things that I like to explain to people about the way the world actually works is that our economy and the world at large doesn't exist in a vacuum. And it can be sometimes difficult for a lot of people to fully understand that. And what do I mean by what I'm trying to say? At the end of the day, one of the reasons why our country is the way it is because somehow, by some miracle of thought, we have managed to divorce from the principles of business from the physical realities. So you have a country where the economy is growing at X%, but banks are making record profits. I'm not using this to jibe at banks, but I'm just giving that as an example. And ultimately, one of the things that we will learn as a nation, particularly through this period, is that the hallmark of productivity is actually, quote unquote, product. So we are playing a missionary role in the development of our country as entrepreneurs because we're making things or we're creating services. It is through the making of things, the creation of services, that you start to have jobs. Jobs don't drop from the sky. Jobs are not always created by governments. Jobs are the result of productive activity taking place in the economy, necessitating the need for more labor. The same thing with financial activity. You cannot just manufacture financial activity from the sky. It is a function of us making things. And then when we make things, it becomes possible. One of the reasons why I harp on mission in business is that we all need to come to an understanding as business people that beyond profits, what are we actually doing this for? Beyond profits, what are we doing this for? I'll use my business as an example. When we started Andela, we were not the first, and what Andela did was identify talented young people, train them to become software engineers, and place them with companies around the world. The company is a big company today. For those of you who don't know it, it's a very big company. It has about 2,000 plus staff. Unfortunately, no longer in our control. We're shareholders, but we're no longer in management control. But you know, over the period of time where it was still an active part of our portfolio, we actually spent a lot of time training. We trained over 106,000 young Nigerians, and we placed about 2,000 of them in jobs with over 200 companies. And you know, it makes profits. It's a pretty good business. But the reason why we started our business was we said to ourselves, Nigeria has an unemployment problem. There were lots of young people who didn't have jobs. So how can we take the skills that we have and build a business around providing skills and jobs to these young people, right? And that was what resulted in our resort to matching the skills and manpower that existed to the global demand for software and technology skills. And we made money trying to do that. Now, notice that the first thing wasn't, how can we make money? You know what I mean? The first thing was, here's a problem. How do we solve that problem? And then by solving that problem, how do we make money from it? And that has stayed with us till today. So the bulk of my work today is identifying challenges and then figuring out ways to turn those challenges into opportunities and then monetizing from the opportunities. The reality is that if we don't do that, we cannot move forward. So the first key principle, which is what I'm trying to say, is that you have to be very clear about what is the why behind your business. It cannot just be money. What is the why behind your business? Now, the second thing is about understanding secrets. And, you know, there's an important business philosopher. And I know some people may not subscribe to business philosophy, but I can assure you it is a very, very important element of why you see businesses in the US striving to become global giants and businesses in Nigeria who don't do very well. And you know, one of my favorite business philosophers is actually a Christian philosopher known as Rene Girard. And there's a very, very critical book he wrote where he talks about things hidden since the things hidden from the foundation of the world, right? And one of his core philosophies, just to describe it to you. By the way, that book is taken from a Bible verse, you know, and so there's no prizes for somebody to identify the Bible verse, but somewhere in Revelations where he talks about things hidden from the beginning of the world. But he talks a lot about mimetic desire, and that's the idea that people generally tend to do the same things, tend to strive for the same things, and then that's what causes conflicts. And that we borrow our desires from others, they're not original. So because other people want to make big profits, we too, we want to make big profits. Because other people want to do this, we want to do this. Where am I taking this to? One of the key things that he talks about is the concept that business, right? Good businesses, right? Are born out of secrets. And obviously, they're a distinct way of looking at the world. Now, one of the benefits of building a mission-driven business is that you very quickly identify what your secret is. And that secret is what distinguishes the business that you are and the service that you are from everybody else. I'm sure all of us have had an experience with a business where you're just like, this business is different. Yes, they're doing the same thing as everybody else, but this business is different. The way they treat me, the way they do things is different. You know, I know when I first moved back to Nigeria, I felt that way about a business like GT Bank, where I felt like, oh, this business is somewhat different. I don't know how they are now, but you know, back in the day, it was very much like there was a specific focus on customer excellence that was very difficult to find in other financial services companies at the time. And this is what I talk about when you're building a mission-driven business, because I figured that the founders of GT Bank took the customer element of it very, very seriously, and then built around that as a secret, and then became the kind of business that they are today as a banking business. When you're a mission-driven business, you distinguish yourself in crowded marketplaces. It's now not difficult to understand why a specific kind of person gravitates towards you, right? And it is that difference that gives you the domination power that makes you successful. I know some of us who are more spiritual might ascribe it to the Holy Spirit, but I feel very strongly that when a business has a value on which it is willing to sacrifice the aimless pursuit of profits, in the end, it ends up being more profitable. Let me bring this back to maybe a more recent development. You know, Facebook is a troubled company. I mean, they've had a lot of challenges through the years. Many of us who followed that business from the beginning can tell you in many different times when, you know, they've made the wrong decision or done the wrong things, and quite frankly, have been shocked by the world. No, in fact, if you read a lot of Facebook literature or newspapers from maybe, you know, back when I was using it in 2005 or so, you wouldn't believe that this is a business that will see 2020. Not even to talk of being as successful as it is. But, you know, very recently, as a result of all this fake news and Trump and so on, you know, Mark Zuckerberg decided to take a stand on the principle of free speech and said, I'm not interested in policing people's speech on my platform. For right or for wrong, that was his stance. And a lot of big advertisers decided to pull out. And I think he lost about 25% of his advertiser base, which is how he makes his money. And he still stood on that principle. That is what we mean by a secret. He's figured out that for right or for wrong, and the jury is still out on that, this is the principle on which my business stands. Beyond money, no matter how much money anybody is going to give to me, this is the principle on which my business stands. And I am ready to lose all the money for that principle. That is a distinguishing characteristic, the second distinct of a mission-driven business. It is very clear, right? With a mission-driven business, what it stands on, right? What it stands on. So that's the second very important point that I have to make. The third thing, the third principle, right, is the principle of multiplication. You know, many of us businesses, sometimes we have very talented people within our organization. And the truth of the matter is, in this day and age, business is all about talent. All about talent. And, you know, we love them so much. And at some point or the other, when they make a decision that, okay, I've had my fill in this organization, it is time for me to make a move and venture into the bold the bold new world, we become hesitant about letting them go for good reason. You know, in many cases, we've taught them, we've invested a lot into them. And obviously our principle is that, you know, given how much I've invested in you, loyalty requires that you remain by my side, you know, forever. But you see, the mission-driven business is a lot like an evangelical mission. In many ways, you know, the concept of mission is in fact drawn from that evangelical fervor with which we have been enjoined to go and preach the gospel, if you actually think about it. And the highlight of a successful mission-driven business is in its ability to grow seeds and plant those seeds which also grow. You know, one of the traditions in Silicon Valley where I learned a lot of what I know about the technology industry is this willingness to let the groomed seed grow on its own structure within their own business structure. And in fact, they encourage it. And that's one very important thing that I've pulled out of their business playbook that has actually driven a lot of the mission-driven businesses that I've been able to either set up myself or be involved in over the years. It is this principle of multiplication. If you can call it church planting, you can call it business planting, seeding mission-driven talent within our organizations to go out there and spread the gospel. And that is a critical element of being a mission-driven organization. A lot of people miss it. A lot of people insist on lording it over others. But this principle is very, very, very important for helping a lot of people and the ideas that your business culture is incubating to be able to grow and scale beyond yourself. It's the legacy-inducing part of doing business, encouraging the talent within our organization to go out and spread our business philosophies. In Silicon Valley, you know, they use a very untoward term called mafia. They call it one of the most popular, would I call it missions, is the PayPal mafia, which was a group of people who worked at PayPal with a gentleman called Peter Thiel, and went on to then build other companies that formed the foundation of the Web 2.0. And then those people have now funded other companies and so on and so forth. And you have powerful dynasties that have emerged from that. Whether it is, you know, if you look at YouTube, it's part of the PayPal mafia. Facebook is part of the PayPal mafia. Google is part of the PayPal mafia. So many interesting businesses emerged out of the PayPal mafia and are now solid bedrocks of Silicon Valley today. This piece is so important. In my experience, what I do, you know, with our program as originally designed, unfortunately it's changed now. We had our, we call them fellows. We had our fellows for 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, the goal was to push them out into the world to spread our principles and to spread the evangelism. Because it was more important to us that the principles of the kind of business we were running became widespread than it was that we were a dominant player in the industry. And incidentally, it made us an even more dominant player in the industry because a lot of people came. And one of the things I notice about mission-driven business, fantastic companies, is that so many people can trace their beginning to that company because the history and the influences are so strong. I mean, in the technology industry, one of those businesses is System Specs, where I've talked to a lot of older people in the industry and they'll say, oh, I started at System Specs. That principle of multiplication is critical. How can you reproduce yourself as a mission-driven businesses? So just to wrap up, before we go into questions and answers, 3 important, very, very important principles of mission-driven businesses that particularly as business people, particularly as people that are concerned about sustainability, not just about profits, especially unsustainable profits, we have to hold very, very dear to our hearts. Again, the first principle, right, is the principle of, for your business, right, what is its why? Why does it exist beyond trading, making profits? Why does it exist beyond making profit? What needs in the universe does it serve? Because that is the reason why we are on earth, to serve a need, to minister to people's needs. So beyond profit, what is that? Number two, what is the secret and principle on which your business stands? What is that distinguishing factor, the one thing that your business stands on? We talked about the example of GT Bank and them standing on customer service as the secret of their business beyond the money. And that has driven their growth so far. And then the third thing is, how do you multiply your business culture, your business philosophy, your business principles? By seeding and setting up your missionary talents outside of your organization to replicate those philosophies, business practices. How do we graduate in some way the mission-driven talent that we gather within our organizations? So those are the three primary principles that I wanted to touch on as we talk about mission-driven businesses. Before I hand off, I just want to say one thing that our country needs, maybe even more than money or anything, is this mission-driven thing. I'll just end on with this story. You see, a lot of people, one of the things that happened to me when when we came upon this COVID thing was, I went back and looked at history. What happened the last time we had a situation like this? And when you go back in history, you read about the Spanish flu of 1918. And I will tell you this, I'm not a prophet, but reading this has almost made one look like a prophet, because every single thing that happened in 1918 is happening now. There was a Spanish flu infection, a first wave. People decided to break the quarantine, came out into the open, celebrating the end of the World War I. And then they went into a second wave where even more people died. God forbid that will happen. But that was what happened in 1918. And I'm sure we are seeing the rising numbers of infected. But the part of the story that nobody really talks about is what happened in the 1920s, which we now call famously the Roaring Twenties. And the Roaring Twenties were a period of unprecedented industrial advancement in America. In many ways, the 1920s were the decades that made America, America. And who were the players? People like Henry Ford, people like Rockefeller. These people emerged in the 1920s in a real way to become the innovators that America depended on. Carnegie Mellon with steel and so on and so forth. And they emerged because they started to build out these mission-driven businesses that were primarily predicated on the idea that we need to connect America, we need to rebuild America. And through their innovations, we got flights, we got mechanized automobiles, we got so many different innovations that have now come to define our world, because these men, after a world war that had killed millions and a Spanish flu pandemic that had killed millions of people around the world, figured out that this was the time for them to build businesses that were not just about making money, but were about rebuilding America. And today we celebrate these men, and we celebrate the 20s all the way up to the Great Depression as an entire decade and a half or so where America saw incredible technological and industrial progress. And my feeling is that the same thing is about to happen again. But what God is going to require of all of us are mission-driven businessmen. I don't think He's going to hand this opportunity to mercantile traders that are just after profits. And so for us to be prepared to operate in that realm, we have to understand these principles and ask ourselves those critical questions. What is the why behind why I'm even doing business? Is this just about making money and feeding my family? How would this transform our country and the continent? How would this help people? What is the secret behind my business? What is the principle behind my business that I am willing to stand on? Where it doesn't matter if I make all the money in the world, if this principle is not adhered to. And of course, how can I take my business philosophy and scatter the seeds by having my mission-driven talents leave me eventually and go set up? How do I not act as a hindrance to them, but rather support them in that effort? Thank you very much. And I'll hand over now to Pastor Tunde.
Thank you very much, Iyin Aboyeji. What a wonderful time. Very exciting time. 3 key principles. Before we start looking at this a little bit closely, please permit me to appreciate the presence of my own senior pastor as well as general overseer, who, by the time I mention his name, you will see the relationship between Iyin and himself. Please join me to welcome my general overseer, Reverend Sam Aboyeji. That's the general overseer of the First Cry Gospel Church in Nigeria. You're welcome, sir.
Yes, sir.
It takes someone like you to drag Baba himself, you know.
Well, I didn't actually hear him, but I'm also very honored he's here, sir.
But to be honest, he's been here a couple of times. A forward-looking man of God who is shepherding us in the right direction. Thank you very much. Thank you. And so many. I mean, my brother and friend, leadership, expert Abiodun Fijavi is also here. All the great guys are here. I mean, we are going to spend a whole lot of time. If I have to mention you, please permit me. If I don't, I'll mention you. What I will have done, he has helped us to do. I'm basically summarizing his presentation himself. And I'm beginning to feel that those of us who are thinking, hey, the Nigeria of tomorrow, do we have a future? We have a future. When you hear someone like Iyin, and that our future is not going to be defined by the hush puppies of this world. The hush puppy Nigerians, it's going to be defined by solid people, entrepreneurs. We have this opportunity now to interact. And incidentally, I've not seen a single thing in the chat room. We were, how do I call it now, spellbound by his speech. And if you forget anything, business is a tool of social change, and that for it to work, a business that is mission-driven must know its why, must also ensure that it has a secret, and to also operate on multiplication principles. So do we have questions or intervention? The chat room is empty, and I'm surprised because in the past, sometimes you have quite a lot of comments. He has succeeded in mesmerizing us and delivering a spellbinding, for want of a better expression. So okay, we are open. You can indicate that you want to ask a question, and then you'll be unmuted, or you unmute yourself, and then we allow. But while people are thinking about that, Abiodun Fijavi said, what a very wonderful presentation. It was so lucid. That perhaps that's the reason why there are no questions. But I have a couple of comments. One, One is this, you know, he has impressed me because he is a millennial, not like someone like me, born before the computer. He's a techie and he's an entrepreneur. But here is him talking about history. Millennials are not known to look into history, to look into the future. And you can imagine as I listened to him, how excited, I was and I've been. Because I tell people, what I propound is the real school, the old school, plus the new school, and then you have the real school. If you don't know history, it's very unlikely that you know where you are going. He has not only those who have benefited from technology, those who are making waves today, there are people who have learned from the past and they are innovating what people have done in the past and they are moving into the future. I must comment that, and I'm asking, why should someone who is interested in innovation, that's my first question, be excited about the past? Because you have given us a roadmap, if you like, or a playbook on how the pandemic will play, simply by looking into the past. But it's been said by experts that millennials are not interested in intellectual work, because to be interested in history, to be interested in intellect, what's the difference? Why are you different? Maybe that's the first thing.
Well, I don't know much. I mean, I'll be honest. I think part of the grace that I have is that I have the benefit of having worked with a lot of older people that are more advanced in age than I am over time. So that makes me very respectful of experience, especially because I still don't believe I have enough of it. And I think what I've learned is, just like it says in Ecclesiastes, there's really nothing new under the sun. Most things have been tried before. However, the key thing is just, being able to understand the patterns of the past and then leveraging that understanding to be able to provide a roadmap that gets you to the destination sooner or faster. That has been very key to my to being able to do the things that I've done in the period of time that I've been able to do it. So I'm very respectful of history, and I think perhaps you can call that my secret. I always look at things from a more historical perspective and understand, okay, what is it that those people did, or what was it that was tried at that time? What is it about that time? What has changed? Every business I do, I say, what has changed? What is now true that makes this business possible? Because these are the critical elements that then begin to help you build a true picture of where you're going. Now, you might not get everything right, obviously, but it reduces the chances that you make very outrageous errors or that you have an overconfidence. So I think I personally, I always make sure to, I spend quite a bit of time understanding the history of what people have done before and trying to build on the back of that.
Thank you, Iyin. Someone is asking, Abiodun Fijabi, can you tell us what are the 3 major experiences that prepare you for what you are doing today? And Kunle Shembore also sent, a comment. He said he is recalling history. I think it's something he has learned from his dad. So can you take those 2 things together? Don't mind the fact that don't mind the fact that Daddy is listening.
No, it's fine. I mean, I actually enjoy listening to my dad a lot because he's also, like me, somebody who enjoys history. Even in his sermons, many of you, if you've listened to him preach, he particularly cites historical facts because, it's a good pattern, The things that God does, some of them are new every morning, but some of them are promises. meaning he has done them before and we have confidence he'll do again, right? So I think it's part of strengthening one's faith to be able to recall the lessons of history and then understand that, you know, the person who did that one is still the same yesterday, today, and forever. But back to that particular question about experiences that have shaped me to do what I do today. Maybe beyond the upbringing and the values, I would say, you know, outside three specific incidences. So, you know, when I was when I was much younger, I started. I was at a school, Loyola Jesuit College. It was a very many of you might know the school, a very good school, high-end school. And you know, while I was at the school, we had a very tragic incident that many of you may also know about, which was December 10th, 2005. You know, I had 60 of my classmates, schoolmates, perishing in a plane crash, a very unfortunate plane crash. And it was, to be quite honest with you, by a hair's miss that I wasn't part of that manifest, because I was originally supposed to come back with that group. And then I rescheduled my flights to go with the Shell group by divine providence. And we thank God for that. But, you know, that gave me a pointer, 2 pointers. Number one, there's obviously a reason for my preservation on earth, right? But also number two, there is a need. The people, when the report came out, many things became clear. From the practices of the airline, to the system that enabled them, to the lack of adequate medical facilities within the Port Harcourt axis, and ultimately the role that private enterprise played in even ensuring that there was at least one survivor. And the big lesson for me from that was, you know, if before I was a Marxist, I think I became very, very hugely capitalist, which one would manage. But I also understood that, you know, it's business with values that allows people to act in that way. That Shell did in tending to the needs of, because she wasn't a Shell child, she wasn't necessarily part of entitled to that benefit, but the organization took it upon themselves to act in that pattern of corporate responsibility. And that had a very, very deep impact on me, such that as I grew up, I became more attuned to, one, the failure of government, and two, the responsibility of business, right? And those were patterns I picked out in every situation where I was in. Ultimate antidote to the failure of government is the responsibility of business. That's one experience. The second experience I had was when I got to Waterloo. That was where I went to school. I went to University of Waterloo. Waterloo is known for one thing and one thing alone, at least at the time I went to school there, which was BlackBerry. That was where all your BlackBerries were made. It was the headquarters of Research in Motion, who were the owners of BlackBerry. And I was there a total of about 6-7 years. And while I was there, I learned a lot about responsible business. BlackBerry rented from our campus. But not just that, they provided jobs to almost half of the students in the school so that they could do their cooperative education term. And not only that, they sponsored a lot of entrepreneurial activities within the school. If anything, the entire city of Waterloo revolved around business. That collaboration between business, academia, and government. That left another very huge impression on me, that it was possible for what I call corporate governance. Because as much as possible, we lived in Waterloo, and Waterloo was BlackBerry, and BlackBerry was a community. And we lived in that bubble for 6-7 years, and it was a good bubble to live in for all sorts of reasons. Now, ultimately, the iPhone emerged and BlackBerry disintegrated. And I thought that that would be the end of the community. But because BlackBerry had established so much amazing talent, the community was able to, without as dominant of a player as BlackBerry was, resurge as a startup capital, which then became its second wave, where you had companies like North, you had companies like Vidyard, and all that. So I watched that happen in real time because I got in 2008. Steve Jobs completed the destruction of RIM, of BlackBerry, by 2009. So I watched it. I watched the slow, the slow deconstruction, and how the community had now rallied together because the alumni went and built amazing companies that kept supporting the community. And I always wondered, why isn't it possible to do in Nigeria? And then I'll say the third experience that really shaped my life was Andela and the founding of Andela. Because in many ways, it was the most unlikely story to come from a place like Nigeria. When we started, the idea was very simple, you know. Lots of young people are unemployed. How do we get them employed? And there are many other businesses like us. There was NIT at the time. I don't imagine we're the first outsourcing company in Nigeria. But what was special about our business and the people in our business was the values that drove the business, the mission that drove the business, which was, how do we shine a light on amazing young people in Africa who, given a little bit of opportunity, could do exploits. I mean, back then we would always tell ourselves, business talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. And our job was to connect opportunity to talent. That was what drove our business. That was what drove the people in our business. That was what we repeated to people every day, even the developers who worked with us. And we would tell them, this is not Nigeria. We used to call it, this is Andela. We'll tell them, you live in an alternate reality. All the things that are true about Nigeria are not true about this place. And I almost used to preach every day before we start work. I would preach for 35 minutes to 50 minutes. And, you know, at the time, we didn't really understand what it was that we were doing. But it was literally a brainwashing exercise. And what I will tell you is, Andela would not have been as successful as it is today if that was not our process. If we hadn't led with mission and reminded people every single day about the fact that we're not just there to make money, we were there to change people's lives. And so many years later, these things are almost self-fulfilling prophecies. Because, you know, I look at many of the people that we started with, some of them have their own companies, some of them, their lives have been completely transformed. People that were earning 40,000 Naira a month, they live abroad, they're earning $100,000 a year, all within a space of 4 or 5 years. So really, it's not just the power of the tongue, but the power of living in the mission that you set out for yourself, because, you know, your faith tends to grow stronger, and then it ultimately becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for you. So those are the 3 experiences that have really shaped me and have given me this focus on mission, as opposed to the pure monetary entrepreneurship that we tend to be known for. So I typically would not start a business without at least taking into consideration a very strong mission. You're muted, sir.
There's a question here, and I think you have answered it. He's saying, we'll appreciate if you can give some ideas around how business missions can be reconciled with conflicting social and national missions. Oftentimes, businesses struggle with finding conducive social, political, economic environments that help achieving business mission. I think essentially you have said so, that this is Andela, this is not Nigeria. And, you know, you were able to hold on with your...
No, even more than that, sir, you know, this is very important. In civilized societies, because of their evolution, there is a government that is not interested in itself. that is willing to align businesses. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To be locked in step on the mission of building a great country. And there's patriotic fervor that ingrains that into people, even when perhaps the feeling is getting missing. But we have no such safeguards in Nigeria. So it is only mission-driven businesses that can actually deliver our country. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
I do.
If you are a business, you're taking FX in order to build a local community, who is going to police whether you actually use the FX for that, or if you just go and change the FX for more and make money? People do that all the time. And we know. But it's only the mission-driven entrepreneur that will say, well, that is not about ethics, it's about mission. Well, that is not why we are in this business. So you would either steer clear of the government funding, you understand what I'm trying to say, or you would actually use the money you've collected for what it was designated for, because you understand that this is your mission as a business. Meanwhile, if you're a profit-driven entrepreneur, you're just betting against government policy and doing the whatever, doing whatever you is the most profitable thing to do, even if it might not be the right thing to do.
Okay.
So,
yeah. Sorry.
No, yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, before we leave, I want you to commit yourself in the presence of this cloud of witnesses, if you like, that very soon we are going to start a fire chat conversation with members of our faculty so that they can express themselves more. I want you to commit yourself that you are going to be back for a fireside.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that people.
Pastor Tunde, I'm not allowed to tell you no, so I don't know why you are asking.
I feel privileged. I feel highly privileged. So because of our time, I'm going to ask you one last question. And then, because I'm a student of strategy and, we've worked with organizations in shaping their strategies, missions, as well as our own for over the years. We've touched on business. And I can tell you what you are saying, they are pretty very real. The question I'm going to ask you before we sign out is, what is the essential difference from your perspective between a mission-driven business and a values-driven business?
That's a great question. Great question. So a values-driven business is primarily focused on ethics. They're focused on doing the right thing, which is a good thing, right? It's about living out the values of the business and living out, living out the values of it. So, for example, a church, a one branch church is a values-driven business in some way. I put the business in quotes, in the sense that, their goal is just, we are Faith and Truth Bible Church. This group of 20 must go to heaven. You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I do.
Now, the difference between that and a mission-driven business is that they have no plan for expansion. They have no plan to propagate their quote-unquote gospel. They're not driven by objectives or goals that go beyond the immediate goals and interests of their small group. The multiplication effect is missing, and there's no goal. So when you talk about a mission-driven business, and let me use the word organization, because sometimes they are non-for-profits as well.
That's right. That's right.
Exactly. So mission-driven organization is a church that says we must be on every street in Nigeria by the year 2020. When we were starting Andela, many people start software shops, and they treat their employees well and they do what they need to do. But we said to ourselves, 100,000 African technology leaders by 2020. And by the grace of God, we got there. So that's a mission, because you are pushing forward on a mission. Obviously, to get to a mission unscathed, you have to lead with values, because
Thank you.
You don't want people to be unfocused. But there's a big difference between a mission-driven organization and a value-driven organization. because a mission-driven organization is pushed, right? Is advanced by its mission. That's its priority. While a value-driven organization is basically just about being itself. And the way they merge is that mission-driven organizations recruit people who share their values so that they remain values-driven. However, mission drives the organization and values tends to most likely drive the individual or a smaller group. You understand what I'm saying? There's no conversion metric in that. So that's how I distinguish between the two. You're professor of strategy, sir. So maybe you can mark me yes or no.
I'm like I told you, I'm a student of strategy. Iyin, thank you very, very much. Because of our time, I wish we could go on and on. Before we go, I'd just like to appreciate all the great people that are on this platform who have come with us Saturday in, Saturday out for this very crucial conversation of ensuring that entrepreneurs are built and they're equipped and business leaders are doing the right things to ensure that our country and our world, is moving forward and in the right direction. Thank you very much, Iyin Aboyeji, tech serial entrepreneur, business leader, young but great. I really, really, really appreciate all that the grace of God has done for you within a very short time. And I trust that you go pretty very far. And I want to appreciate Reverend Sam Aboyeji, our father, who is also here, and all the great people that are here for such a wonderful conversation. Once again, we are going to bring you back for a fireside chat in which many
absolutely more I'm looking forward to it.
Many more questions, and then we open up quite a whole lot of discussions, particularly between missions and values and the role of technology as we go into the future. Once again, to the team at the Touchstone team, I'd like to thank you for being there, designing this program and working it out to ensure that we have a wonderful time of serving the business community. Thank you once again. Till we come your way again next Saturday, same time. God bless you. This is BSS, Touchstone Business Sustainability Series. It's our desire and prayer that your business will be sustained, and it will not only be sustainable, it will be sustainable and thrive in a very difficult season. Thank you, and may the good Lord bless you. Have a great weekend. God bless you.